Hate is on the rise here in Massachusetts, according to a new report from the Anti-Defamation League, which found a 33% spike in hate crimes in this state, according to the latest FBI data. The ADL also reported a spike in anti-Semitic incidents, distribution of white supremacist propaganda, and extremism targeting the LGBTQIA community. It's an alarming trend we've seen nationwide, but the organization says Massachusetts is one of the worst states. And the problem here is only growing. Joining me to discuss are Oren Segal, Vice President of the ADL Center for Extremism. Oren, what is it about the state of Massachusetts?
So what's happening in Massachusetts is not unique to Massachusetts. We're seeing a rise in hate crimes, anti-Semitic incidents, crimes against other communities across the nation. And frankly, it shows that I think people's preconceived notions of where this type of hate may be in the country are probably often wrong. In a state like Massachusetts, which has a large population, of course, we are seeing the types of activity that perhaps some people think wouldn't happen in that part of the country or that is somebody else's problem. So Massachusetts is representative of, frankly, what we're seeing across the country.
I've seen some speculation that there's something about the history, the colonial history of Massachusetts that draws fanatics. Is there any truth to that?
I mean, extremists will never miss an opportunity to leverage either a crisis or some, historical background to glom onto in order to attract or to try to attract people to their cause. So, Massachusetts being a place where, there was a Tea Party and revolution, I mean, it's going to be naturally attractive to those who want to create their own revolution today. But frankly, it's about extremists finding sort of local issues to try to exploit. And again, that's happening throughout the country.
So let's look at some of the numbers from your report, and then maybe you can break some of this down for us. From 2021 to 2022, anti-Semitic incidents up 41%. White supremacist propaganda up 71%. And then you also found Massachusetts is a hotbed for anti-LGBTQ plus extremism, which increased nationwide in 2022. So, Oren, help us understand the anti-Semitic incidents. How are they manifesting themselves?
Yeah, so what we do at ADL is report and document a wide variety of anti-Semitic incidents that are reported to us by communities. So this can be in the form of harassment or vandalism at an institution. It also includes assaults. And this 41% increase is quite a stark number. Nationwide, we saw a 36% increase year over year. And all told, the highest record of anti-Semitic incidents ever reported to ADL in the 40 plus years of doing this. Part of this, I think, we believe, is because of the broader normalization of anti-Semitism and hate, right? What happens on our social media feeds, in our public discussion, often animates what we're seeing on the ground. And I think it's no surprise that we're seeing this increase in anti-Semitic incidents in Massachusetts and elsewhere at the same time that we have influencers who are using their platforms to promote that sort of hatred. So when anti-Semitism is a political football, really the people who are becoming those who are victimized are those who are on the ground in these communities.
So just before we began taping here, there was an announcement out of the Biden-Harris administration talking about what they call the first national strategy to combat anti-Semitism. And one of the pillars of that strategy is apparently to address that normalization, to have the NBA get involved, the recording industry get involved. What can you tell us about this strategy?
Right. So the mere fact that there is this first comprehensive national strategy on anti-Semitism is a reminder that there's a problem with anti-Semitism in this country that would make that even be needed. It's really, really important because not only is it the first of its kind, but it has very specific details about how government ought to tackle this issue in terms of focusing on security for Jewish institutions, but also saying that this requires a whole of society approach, that people who are influencers, who are, normalizing what we talk about every single day, that are basically influential people have a role to play in combating anti-Semitism. And it lays out a pretty significant plan. I should also note, ADL was involved in helping promote some of the strategies that we have that we work on every day. But knowing that, government is speaking out, using their position of influence to call this out and then provide solutions is just an incredibly important step.
One of the pieces of this, though, really is, as you say, the role of social media, the role of the companies that are behind social media. Earlier this week, the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, talked about the detrimental influence, issuing a stark warning about social media and calling on more attention to be paid to the companies behind all this. So this is really a big piece of the puzzle when it comes to tackling hate. What do you think the responsibility should be of social media companies?
Yeah, it's just not unreasonable anymore for users of social media to expect that these companies put people over their profits, to make it more difficult for anti-Semitic harassment and ideas and narratives to spread around the world with the greatest of ease. And so what we have been calling for, and what I think this national strategy reinforces, is some accountability for those who enable anti-Semitism to reach the widest possible audiences. That means those companies that are making money hand over fist invest some of that in identifying anti-Semitism and other forms of hate and making their platforms a place where it's harder and difficult to actually spread those messages. Again, that seems logical, but it has seemed very difficult for these companies to do, and it's not unreasonable.
So you have found in your own research a lack of transparency from these companies that claim they are committing to tackle these issues. So can you describe the issues, the problems that you found?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is that not only is it lack of transparency, that a lot of companies don't even provide the data to have outside folks assess the levels of anti-Semitism. But frankly, it's the algorithms that they build that actually bring people deeper into these hateful ideas, right? They are focused on engagement. And if anti-Semitism and other forms of hate are selling, they're going to basically curate that and provide that to folks. And we're saying that doesn't have to be. So one of the ways that we have tried to combat that is we know how extremists and anti-Semites and bigots speak. We know the tattoos that they use, the code words that they use, the memes that they deploy. And we provide that to companies to train their algorithms to identify that so that they could proactively remove it. But that requires a company wanting to create a safer space online. And sometimes that's the challenge.
And you also talk about the need for better reporting to be able to account for all the hate crimes. Is there really an undercount?
Yeah, so, nationwide, there's 80 plus cities that report zero hate crimes or don't report at all. Massachusetts does report hate crimes, and we saw a 33% increase there. But I think overall, data drives policy. In order to solve a problem, you need to get an understanding of what that is. And that's why reporting hate crimes is so important. That's why reporting anti-Semitic incidents to ADL and to law enforcement is important. That's why when the LGBTQ community is under attack and in the crosshairs by extremists, we need reporting there as well, because that will then help move the needle to find solutions from policymakers and others.
But for the LGBTQ plus community within the state of Massachusetts, isn't there more that can be done by the state to protect them?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there are mechanisms that are set up by government, by non-governmental organizations for reporting. People need to do that. I think another thing that is critically important is that people in positions of power, not only in government, but influencers, as we described, speak out against the conspiracies that are running rampant against the LGBTQ community. It's not just that you have Nazis marching, in the middle of Boston who promote these hateful ideas. It's sometimes we're seeing others who have more influence, who are not card-carrying members of any extremist group, who are promoting these same narratives. And all that does is empower those who have a history of violence.
So just before we began taping again, Stuart Rhodes, the founder of the Oath Keepers, the far-right militia, he was sentenced to 18 years in prison for his role in the January 6th attack. What do you think the impact will be of these sentencings following January 6th? Do you think it will really have resonance?
I think accountability and the demonstration of accountability by government for a January 6th insurrection is important. 18 years is no small thing. And we know that since the arrests have begun, over 900 of those involved in the insurrection, the Oath Keepers have basically not been as active as they were. So it shows that accountability is important, that it has an impact on the activity of the groups that are held accountable. But it's not all one size fits all. There's another group called the Proud Boys, who have also been part of the investigation into the insurrection, and they're actually more active. In fact, many of those groups are targeting, for example, the LGBTQ community. But overall, when the country sees that there is accountability for violence, accountability for hate, accountability for trying to undermine our very democracy, I think that sends a really important statement.
And why do you think we are seeing this rise? I mean, the words of Donald Trump, the internet, gun culture. Is there one area you would say that really, is it the economy that sends us into these frequent historic spirals of hate, anti-Semitism, and all other forms of hate?
There's no one reason, but, historically, when you look at pandemics or economic downturns, or, concerns that legitimate people have about their livelihood, people tend to look at others to blame for these challenges. And often that's where hate starts to incubate. The problem is there are individuals, there are groups and movements that actually try to exploit those moments in time. So this rise in hatred and violence that we're seeing in Massachusetts and elsewhere, it's not surprising that it comes off of a pandemic, for example, but there's no one silver bullet to solve it. This is why we need social media to act. We need influencers to act. We need government and everyday people. The one thing everyday people can do is, if you see something that is hateful, you see violence, report it, because that data is going to help us find solutions.
Even those small steps are very important. Thank you, Oren Segal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.